There's been quite a lot of people making their own Zelda tier lists lately, and while some come close, others are completely wrong.
Your music's bad and you should feel bad.
I've decided to finally settle the score on this 33-year-old franchise. Hey Shackers, Greg here, and as you've probably guessed, I'm about to tackle one of the most difficult lists of all time. The top 10 Legend of Zelda games. Now, for this list, I've taken into account each game's innovation, design, gameplay, music, art, and of course, votes from our community, staff, and Twitter. So let's dive into what is perhaps the most controversial list I've ever done. Well, maybe not as controversial as the Pokemon one. Anyway, these are the top 10 best Legend of Zelda games. Originally released in 2001 on the Game Boy Color. You guys remember that? When the Game Boy got color, it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, like 2 Timmy tacos and a couple
Don't
of
even
mini...
think about it, pal.
Okay, if you don't
You're
have...
not getting anything from me, mister.
Could I speak to your manager, please?
Listen, cheapy, cheapy, hit the road or it's gonna get ugly. Kiss your toadstool goodbye, loser.
With games like Super Mario Bros. Now in color, you might actually forget where you are.
Oh, who goes there?
Game Boy Color, get into it.
The really interesting thing about Oracle of Seasons and Ages was that these games weren't developed by Nintendo. They were done by a company called Flagship, which was a subsidiary of Capcom. So basically, Capcom made these games. Each one of these two games brought with it a few unique things. Ages was more puzzle-focused, while Seasons focused on more action combat gameplay. While the story is pretty convoluted and complex, especially since it spans across 2 games, it's still a unique Zelda experience. Coming off the coattail of Link's Awakening, which trust me I'll get to later, both games had fun environments, gear and items to collect, and even friendly animal buddies to help you on your quest. If you owned a Game Boy Color in 2001, the game was pretty impressive, even more so when you find out that Nintendo didn't directly develop it. A strong game in its own right, Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, can be best described as a love letter to the Super Nintendo's Link to the Past. However, it changes things up a bit with various dungeon design, item locations, and a pleasing 3D visual art style. In fact, most of the game's core items are rented through Ravio, who takes up residence in your house. By having a lot of these key items available from the start of the game, it opens up the world tremendously, in a way where you can explore rather than being set on a single linear path to find a certain item. The game also brought with it the ability to merge into walls. This comes into play to solve puzzles and get to hard to find secret areas. Link Between Worlds does a tremendous job filling the giant shoes of the SNES Classic, and it does so all while painting its own unique picture. If you haven't played it, and I do realize it's on the 3DS, you really should. You'll be happy you did. I really have a soft spot for this game, and if it were entirely up to me, it would have been a lot higher on this list. Twilight Princess brought with it a whole new Hyrule, one that was dark and gritty, with terrifying enemies. I mean, some of the Twilight enemies were pretty creepy and weird looking, and to this day, I still have nightmares from that Snow Peak Ruins boss. The art really stood out from the rest of the Zelda series, and in my personal opinion, the game had some of the most interesting items in franchise history, like the ball and chain. And my personal favorite, the spinner. The environments and dungeons looked great in the world's ominous tone, and the boss fights are pretty creative and visually pleasing. It may be low on this list, but Twilight Princess is a great Zelda game, even if Midna gets some hate.
Today happy rule.
Originally released in 1986, the game was the first of its kind, throwing you into what at the time was a huge open world with very little hand-holding. I mean, the game doesn't even give you a weapon at the start, you have to go out of your way to grab it. This truly was a revolutionary formula and would be the core design for all Nintendo Zelda games moving forward. Okay, well, almost all.
Well, excuse me, Princess.
Its music is still loved today, with the world and dungeon themes cementing their place in video game music history. The ideas and designs were a game changer in the adventure game genre, and it still holds up today and will do so for many more years. Coming off the tails of the iconic Ocarina of Time came Majora's Mask, a direct sequel to the N64's first Zelda adventure. While the overall world was smaller and only had 4 dungeons when compared to Ocarina of Time, the game's unique design more than made up for it. Majora's Mask added a real-time in-game clock element, giving you, the player, full 3 days to stop a cataclysmic event from destroying the world of Termina. The famous Ocarina made a return, helping you slow down or speed up this in-game timer. Remembering what things happened on certain days or times, where someone would be on that day or time, made for some really fun puzzle mechanics. And of course, there were the masks themselves, allowing Link to transform into one of 3 famous creatures, like a Deku Scrub, Goron, and Zora. Other masks may not have transformed you directly, but did modify your gameplay in some way. The game added so much to the world of Zelda, it was really impressive. Even more so when you find out that the development time was a fraction of what it was for Ocarina. The items, secrets, dungeons, and masks all came together perfectly to create a sequel worthy of the Zelda name. The year is 1993, just 2 years after the release of A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, which changed the face of adventure games forever. Along comes Link's Awakening on the Game Boy. It was a fully fledged Zelda experience. Open world, puzzles, dungeons, items, music, story, all woven perfectly into this handheld device. Zelda was now officially portable. To this day, it's probably as well liked and known as its Super Nintendo counterpart. Nintendo worked their magic and was able to fit everything that made a Zelda game, well, a Zelda game, all while doing it on a system that ran on 4 AA batteries. The game is incredibly fun to play, and it's everything a Zelda game is at its core. There's even a fully 3D remake coming out soon, so if you haven't had a chance to play this amazing journey on the Game Boy, you'll be able to do it on the Nintendo Switch.
Down with Zelda from the very start. I got the heart, it's smarts to play the part. Down with Zelda. Peeping through with an overhead view, cause a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. So I stay on track, collect the facts, never cut slack, and I always watch my back for Jack. Down with Zelda, yeah. Don't understand, I'm the man with the plan, cause the power's in my head and the power's in my hand. Down with Zelda.
First Zelda game to showcase the power of the GameCube, which at the time was the world's most powerful console on the consumer market. Although many people were confused about the art design of the game, especially when we saw this incredible trailer showcasing the power of what the GameCube could do at Space World 2000. However, Toon Link, as he would become to be called, warmed our hearts and made us laugh and cry. He was the most animated and expressive Link we, the gamers, had ever received. And although the world was a little sail-heavy, the islands, water, and dungeons looked gorgeous, making beautiful work of the cel-shading art style. The game went on to spawn multiple Toon Link Zelda adventures on Nintendo handheld devices, featuring the same unique cel-shading art style. But Wind Waker was the first and best. Now we just need a Nintendo Switch version. I know, it's number 3. It's number 3. Can you believe it?
And the fans do not like this one bit.
And here come the pretzels.
It is top 3, which is still pretty damn good. Zelda: A Link to the Past is probably the most iconic Zelda game, mainly due to how it changed the face of the adventure genre in gaming. With a vast open world to explore with little to no hand-holding, meant you had to figure out where to go on your own, with the only hints being map markers and areas you needed a key item to progress the story forward. Secrets were everywhere and became a huge part of the game's charm. Switching between the light and dark world essentially doubled the world's map size and played an important role in puzzle solving and exploration. The game was nearly perfect and fantastically designed, considering it was released in 1991. The music also remains one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. Link to the Past encouraged you to explore, experiment, and rewards you for it, and thanks to the game's 16-bit pixel art style, it holds up extremely well, even today. Now again, we just need it on Nintendo Switch.
This time, it calls you to the ultimate battle of good against evil. To a quest few are prepared for, and fewer still survive. But perhaps now the power is within your grasp. It's the game that's already a legend. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Only on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with superpower.
Like I mentioned before, Nintendo had changed the face of the adventure game genre with Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo in 1991, and again for their handheld Game Boy in 1993 with Link's Awakening. But now, it was the time to leap into 3D. In November of 1998, we got our very first fully 3D Zelda game, Ocarina of Time. The world was vast, the models, for the time, looked great, and the game introduced us to an amazing targeting system, one that would eventually become the standard in most video games. The huge open world again doubled in size as you were transported between past and the future land of Hyrule. Switching to first-person view to fire arrows and your hookshot was simply amazing. Dungeons were excellently designed and themed, even if the Water Temple was one of the hardest dungeons I've ever had to beat in any Zelda game. Boss encounters were unique and epic, and of course, the music was probably the best Zelda soundtrack ever made. The use of the Nintendo 64's hardware was impressive, even though some textures looked a bit muddy. The amount of side questing, extra items, and puzzles were blended and transported perfectly into the 3D space. It forever changed the way a Zelda game would be played, until March 2017. What makes a perfect game? Is it the art, design, or how well it withstands the test of time? Or is it a game with systems that play off each other so well you can almost do anything or go anywhere? Breath of the Wild opened up the Zelda franchise to a whole new level. A massive open world that Link could explore and climb literally just about everything. A game where your weapons could break, encouraging you to try new ones. The mechanics in Breath of the Wild are extremely impressive, setting a new bar for all future Zelda games. Granted, the game's lack of music was a bizarre choice at first, but it ends up working. And although the game only had 4 core dungeons, it more than made up for it with the introduction of shrines. And just like Link to the Past, it encourages you to explore, climb, poke and prod everything. It's a perfect game. A 10 out of 10. We went 9 out of 10. Limitations of hardware, my ass. I'm gonna fix this right now. Fixed. 10 out of 10. Perfect game. You're wrong. If you own a Nintendo Switch, the game is a mandatory buy. And if you didn't like it, well then you just don't like video games. Which Zelda game did you guys like the best? Which ones did I miss? Let us know in the comments below. For more videos like this and everything else gaming related, you're already in the right place. You're on Shacknews.com.
Here it comes!
You must save her, my daughter.